Uriah Faber.
What's up, guys? Stephen One Boy Thompson.
This is IBF champion, Earl Smith Jr.
This is Cynthia Calvio.
Hi, this is Michaela Mayer.
This is Derek the Black Beast Lewis.
This is Daniel Miracle Man Jacob. Shout out to Kendrick and Matt.
And you're listening to
the Slip and Dip podcast
With your boy Kendrick and Matt.
And you're listening to Kendrick and Matt on the Slip and Dip podcast.
Slip and Dip podcast, episode 60. A little throwed off, though. I'm just going to freestyle and wing it. Kendrick Johnson and Matthew Wells coming to you with another quality show from top to bottom. Talking fresh off the heels of UFC Boise. Well, Mr. Mark De La Rosa, who had one of the best rear naked chokes of the night last night. And we'll be joined by Sherdog's own Anthony Walker. 3 kinfolks for the price of 1. What's up, man?
What's happening, man? A lot of stuff in the world of combat sports, man. We just got finished with our interview with Mark De La Rosa. That'll go up on the YouTube page here in just a few minutes for you guys out there watching. And helping us talk about all the stuff that went down this past weekend and wherever else the conversation goes. Mr. Anthony Walker from Sherdog. Me and him met out at in Anaheim, UFC 214, and exchanged information and all that good stuff. And joining us now on the show. Here he is. What's up, man?
Nothing much, man. What's going on, fellas?
I'm doing good, man. What do you think about the state of the UFC? We've seen history in the last couple weeks. We got wins that Conor McGregor going to go back. What do you think we're going to see in the next 6 months? Because I have a funny feeling UFC landscape is going to change between now and the beginning of 2019.
It's something definitely. There's going to be a seismic shift in what we know the UFC to be today, because it's just too many things going on right now that raise eyebrows. Let's not forget about Project Spearhead. Leslie Smith is doing her work. There's some sort of ruling that I think was found in her favor as far as classifying the fighters as employees instead of independent contractors. The antitrust suit is still pending. A lot of people are forgetting about that. Conor McGregor is still looming over the lightweight division. He can pretty much do what he wants at this point. We see Brock Lesnar clearly can do whatever he wants as well. There's just too many things going on right now that are far from the norm, and something has to come to a head. Like this isn't going to be the UFC like we know it.
Oh, I fully agree with you. And 2 things that to add on to your list, people are not talking about that John Jones stuff. The way, because I was in the gym when Dana got the call and all that, because it was Mayweather McGregor fight week. And like the whole the 30 test came back or whatever, and they have made no ruling. People forget John didn't get caught with the PED first time. The sexual enhancement drug is just on the ban list. It's not a performance enhancement. This time it was supposed to be, but then they have not had no clarification, and nobody said anything about it. So it's like he's just on ice. And then number 2, which kind of with the Leslie Smith thing. These fools they don't got no money from this UFC deal with ESPN. It's $1.2 billion bill. These fools don't get a dime. And nobody talking about it, but we got these world-winner journalists. Hey, when you cover more than one sport, you catch up on that stuff. But that ain't none of my business stuff.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense whatsoever, man. That whole thing is going on. I wrote a column, actually, right after Leslie Smith, one about Leslie Smith, and then something else that Dana White said at a press conference, I think it was. I can't remember what it was, but it was one of the many quotables that he probably shouldn't have said. And it was just like, it was one of those. Yeah, it was one of those. He said something that was just totally outrageous, and it was kind of like, man, you know that there are legal repercussions for certain things that you are saying. You are speaking as the head of this company that is in the middle of litigation. You probably would have watched your words. Right. It doesn't. Some things just don't make any sense to me, and it really, like, I'll go back to something that Jeff Sherwood, the founder of Sherdog, he said, and we had a brief discussion on air about this, and it was kind of like, is this really a sport? And I was like, man, this is a sport. Like, yeah, these are real athletes. This is real competition. Therefore, this is a sport. And he's like, no, it isn't. This is entertainment. And I think we're getting closer and closer to the entertainment line and further away from the sports line. You know, to have Brock Lesnar who, granted, I want to see that fight. I want to see him and DC fight just for the entertainment value. The style matchup should be interesting. I think DC will beat the brakes off of him, I'll be entertained by that. But still, the idea that he's getting a title shot after a steroid suspension, that he's kind of ducked around through retirement and just a mismatch of paperwork to ease his way through it all, when you haven't had a legitimate win on your record for what, like 6 years or something crazy like that. It doesn't make it sense.
Over 8.
Oh, it's been that long. Wow.
It was mid 2010 was his last official win. I know he got the win at Mark Hunt at UFC 200, but that is no longer on his record, so you can't count that. So the last time he has an official W on his record was mid 2010. I wish I had I had it pulled up, but
was that Shane Carwin?
I believe so. I believe it was Shane Carwin was actually the last one.
I wouldn't even come to sports.
Yeah, because after that it was I was hanging out in Buffalo Wild Wings when I saw that one. I remember that. But yeah, it's crazy. Like to your point about whether or not this is a sport or this is entertainment. Everything obviously outside of the cage is entertainment. Everything's purely entertainment. Inside the cage, yeah, you got rules that you got to follow, but even those rules aren't consistent. Those rules are like you got different rules every weekend, so you never know. Obviously the judges, like if you watched UFC Boise this weekend, obviously the judges don't know how the hell to score these fights, because I don't know if it's the thing whether they're the new rules or in the old rules or whatever have you, but there were a lot of decisions, a lot of scorecards that looked really, really wonky, and it's just one of the many parts of the thing. Like that's the only thing that's actually making this still a sport, because you look at rankings don't matter. Rankings are ridiculous. You look at if you go to UFC's page and look at the actual breakdown of who are submitting these rankings, just look at some of these people that are submitting rankings. They have guys that haven't competed in years in the top 10.
Or once in the last 5 years.
Yes. It's crazy.
Yeah. The UFC ranking system is total joke time. There's nothing there's nothing you can take real serious about them. I mean, it does make for when I'm writing, it makes for, a good thing to say, oh, the number 2 ranked featherweight or something like that. But beyond that, it's really worthless. I mean, they just kind of say what they say to promote who they're promoting at the time. And it's this revolving door of events. I mean, Boise, Idaho is the perfect example of a revolving door of fights and fighters that are nameless and faceless. And an event comes and goes and whatever, on to the next. Where nothing stands out. I mean, one thing I find really crazy about this is like this, they're simply just plugging in holes. They've got all these schedules to fill, so they're just putting down people to slot in. Okay, you're not injured, you can fight. You're not injured, you can fight this guy, and they just throw them in there. But the locations and the matchups and something that just don't make any sense. Please explain to me why Junior Dos Santos, like a Brazilian star. And I'm a mess of it, Ivanov, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, from Bulgaria. Like, please explain to me how this screams a main event in Boise, Idaho.
Yeah, exactly. Doesn't make any sense.
Man, nothing reminds me of Idaho like a Brazilian and a Bulgarian fighting each other. I don't. It doesn't. The things don't line up. It's especially with like the rich history of like wrestlers that have gone into MMA in the Midwest. Like, you think you do something that's more tailored to the market that you're going to, as opposed to just throwing bodies. It's one thing to do that at Madison Square Garden or like the Staples Center, the card coming up soon, where you got these big markets and you can just throw stars on there and see what happens. But on these smaller markets, you might want to tailor your cards to those a bit more. But
yeah,
what do I know?
I agree 100%, man. I agree 100%. It's just, you got to fill these names. Like you said, there's so many cards, and they have to struggle and shuffle to get these names and get these guys to agree to bouts. It's just like, okay, you agree? All right, cool. We're just going to throw you on here. It doesn't matter. Like, even the bout order last night was crazy. Like, why was
that was ridiculous.
Like, I like Sage Northcutt a lot, but why was he the co-main event?
Why was Kat Zingano and Marion Renault so low in the card? Why was Why was Jessica Aguilar the curtain jerker on Fight Pass?
Right.
There's some things that's just like, really? Like, you have some good names here. Like, what are we doing?
There were a lot of good names on that card last night, but the bout order didn't make sense. Chad Mendez making his return, and he's the second one on the main card. Just the order of it all, man. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. The crazy thing on top of that, not only the bout order, but I'm so glad this Fox thing is almost done, so we can actually get done with the UFC card within a whole day. Like, you have to dedicate your whole damn day to watch the UFC card when it's all on FS1 or all on Fox. It's crazy. Man,
I DVR'd that this morning. I watched it on DVR when I woke up. I had things to do. I'm like, I can't dedicate every single Saturday, man. I'm like, my wife would be upset with me if all I did was sit in my underwear watching fights all day long. Like, we gotta live a life. So we went out and we actually had fun, you know. So I had the YouTube TV set up. So I woke up this morning. I drilled through all the commercials. I drilled through the post-fight speeches. I just saw the fights, and that was it. And that took me about an hour and a half to get through everything. So I'm pleased with the time that was.
Isn't it crazy? Isn't it crazy? Like, these shows, they literally, like, it started at 5:30 Central Time for me. It started at 5:30. First fight, like you said, Jessica Aguilar, Jody Escobar, first fight. Wow. All right. Junior Dos Santos didn't get on the mic after his win until 12:10 my time.
Yeah, it's crazy.
I got both of y'all beat. Unlike other people in MMA, I cover more than one sport. I had to go to the fantasy football convention, so I'm talking to the Chief Elliott's and the Michael Irvins of the world, making more money than these people covering only one sport, but we're not going to talk about that. And so I came in, I was tired. So, fortunately for me, I got no money to have satellite radio. I listened to the watch on satellite radio and was dozing off and on. So I was listening to them and then flash forward and saw the highlights so I know what to talk about. So I know exactly what you're saying. I ran the DVR. I literally listened to the fights, and then when Chang had to knock out, I had to go look at that because you can only hear a knockout. You can't. It's different than seeing one. So I had to go back and see that for myself. But for the most part, I kind of watched it a little bit on my own personal delay, and didn't have to do all that. My man, my co-host is the Road Warrior. He that 5-7, 5-12 guy. I can't do it. Unless it's a pay-per-view, I can't do it. It's even hard to do it in person, which is crazy. Even being there live in the arena, it's effing hard to do that. Because the Madison Square Garden one, the crazy thing about it is it starts around like 6 local time, and we ain't leaving MSG until like 4 o'clock.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I stay, and being from Central Time Zone, my body's already effed up. And then I stay in New Jersey when I go out there because my cousin owns a Chick-fil-A. So I have to wait another hour and can't leave New York till 5:30 to take the train back to New Jersey. So that's a whole nother level. That East Coast car is crazy.
I used to be a bartender at a sports bar in the DC area, and a fight night was a marathon. It was a marathon of an evening. And I'm telling you, man, you're getting out of there like just drenched in sweat, beer done splashed on you. You know, I had cigarette smoke blown in your face all day, and you're walking out of there at 3:30 in the morning or something, just insanity, and just dragging ass. Like, no thank you. I mean, it's crazy, like the demand on the average mixed martial arts fan. If you want to keep up with this sport, there are so many different things that you have to keep up with. So just for a breakdown on what, like, the streaming services, like, so you've got to pay for pay-per-views or go to a bar and endure the foolishness that comes with sitting at a bar watching a UFC fight. So that's money out your pocket. You've got a Fight Pass subscription. Now we're going to have ESPN Plus. We've got DAZN, the Bellator one now. I think that started next month.
Yeah.
Or September. Yeah. So you got to have that. You've got, like, I don't have landline cable, so I've got the internet set up. So I've got YouTube TV for that. I used to have Sling TV, but they're trash. I hope they hear me. Sling TV.
Shots fired.
Right.
Yeah, man. So I've got all these things, all this money devoted just to watching the sport, and it's also so much content being thrown at you. God forbid you keep up with LFA, you keep up with Invicta, you keep up with all these different promotions that are putting out very good products, but you just can't escape the UFC's grasp because it's just so much. I mean, we'll have stretches of like 10 weeks where there is always a UFC card.
Yeah,
it's always fight. It's always fight.
I'm convinced, like some of these guys on Twitter that that post the gifs of like damn near every fight, like Caposa and a couple of those other ones. I'm pretty convinced that there's more than one person behind these accounts because they can't be watching all these cards. They can't.
Or
be.
just
it's
some rich
damn near
guy.
impossible.
Yeah.
No, it's crazy though. It is crazy though, man. Like just the demands of a fan, and I mean, as a journalist, if you're trying to cover all that stuff as a journalist, and then kind of as Kendrick alluded to earlier, was like the pay is not great in MMA journalism. Like there's maybe
no, it isn't.
Do you think there's more than 5 people that make a full-time living covering the sport?
Maybe 6. I mean, it's like, and really all of them are at MMA fighting, pretty much.
I was saying, yeah, between MMA fighting and MMA junkie, who else is really doing full time?
Yeah, they do a hell of a job. I don't see. Here's a little side thing. I have a lot of stuff going on. We have people that be hating. I call them studio gangsters. And like I cover more than one sport. I cover the NFL and the NBA. If it was that easy, you would just walk up in there and cover those sports. But we're gonna keep it going. So I get multiple checks from multiple organizations, and I be telling people, and you get to look with somebody like, yeah, right, like whatever, that type thing. Well, fast forward to last year, November 2017, Kobe Bryant owns a big chunk of body armor. I've been knowing Kobe since I was an intern. My relationship with him has got me cool with a lot of NBA players. That's kind of like helped me out or whatever. I've told some people in the media, just like on a personal level, yeah, I'm cool with Kobe, da-da-da. Yeah, right. So Kobe's out there. What's up, Kendrick? In front of everybody. We got Dana White in the room, a lot of the top UFC press people. All of a sudden now I'm validated. Oh, you really do know you. Like I haven't been telling your ass for the last year and a half that. So I didn't think it's funny. Because I'm versatile and cover more than one sport and get more than one check, I get hated on. Oh, you think you all that, but then last year this time, you thought I was just running my mouth. So which one is it? I know my girl Chelsea, shout out to Chelsea at Bank of America, when she see me every 2 weeks, she know what time it is. That's real. That's real.
And it is like the whole MMA journalism thing is pretty interesting, and I'm pretty new to the whole thing. Like I got into it.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you how did you get started. I was gonna ask you that. That was gonna be my last question. So let's get into that.
Okay, yeah. So this, to make a long story short, a buddy of mine named Jules, we started a podcast called Fight Nights, and this was just an independent thing. We ran it on SoundCloud, and TJ DeSantis at Sherdog heard it, liked it, and he, we were introduced by Todd Martin, who's a long-established journalist for Sherdog and the LA Times, and I think he also works for the Wrestling Observer. So we were friends in high school, and we stayed in touch after we parted ways from high school. He put me on to it once he heard the podcast and liked it. TJ liked it and invited us over to Sherdog Studios. We got to working with TJ, got put on to their radio network. Once Fight Nights was canceled, they retained me to be assistant program director. And I co-hosted for Jordan Breen for a little bit. Nice. I hosted Beatdown days that TJ couldn't make it and whatnot. So it was a pretty regular thing. And then I started getting writing assignments. So when Sherdog Radio is definitely not what it used to be. It's been essentially defunded for the most part. So they had to give up the studio, and TJ's working a little bit too far away for me to drive for the little bit of pay it would have made me. Yeah. So they kept me as a writer, and I'm doing that, and it just I enjoy being able to, because I would be watching as much UFC and Bellator and MMA content period as I could anyway, because I'm a diehard fan. So to get paid to be there, to watch the fights, to interview fighters, to be really a part of the sport is definitely a good thing. It just doesn't pay the bills as much. So brother gotta have a day job, It's just gotta get this paper.
Exactly.
And that's really what it is, man. The journalism thing journalism is just a victim of a lot of changing paradigms right now. Entertainment itself and media, all of that is changing, and journalism's kind of caught in this weird transition period. You don't know what to do. Like, at least with MMA, the journalism is still kind of dominated by people who are originally just fans, and that sense of it's still a certain sense of community. I will say, I'll give it that. In which, obviously how we linked up. Of course, I mean, we were the only two brothers that were there for all the fight week. So I'm like, we had to exchange business cards like that. That just had to go down,
Yeah, yeah.
But it's definitely interesting seeing how the sausage is made, hearing a lot of the stories, the things that are going on behind the scenes, the events that I'm hearing about as a fan, and now talking to some of these people involved with these things and getting their perspective. It's pretty interesting. It's an eye-opening experience, I'll say.
Yeah, there's no doubt, man. That's probably one of the best things I would think about covering the sport. Because like I said, I didn't start covering the sport for money. I was hoping it would probably eventually evolve into some sort of income, not necessarily a full-time thing, but I did it because I love the sport, right? So, and when we didn't start up MMA Latest, but we essentially birthed MMA Latest into what it was. We got credentialed, yada yada. We started traveling. We got a couple of sponsors that liked what we were doing, and so, myself and Jim Edwards, we were able to travel to these events a lot more often, and like you were saying, all that stuff that you hear about, and then you start seeing during fight week when you're actually start talking to these people, and even behind the scenes on fight night, you start seeing this stuff go down. You're just like, okay, all right, this is real. It's real. It's real.
When you see guys at the weigh-ins, like when at the official weigh-ins, and you hear the stories about bad weight cuts and stuff, but when you see a fighter literally being dragged in by his team, and he's drenched in sweat, and he's got a towel wrapped around him, he can barely lift his head up, and I'm like, man, this guy's gonna get punched in the head tomorrow. Something about this ain't right.
Right, Anthony. I got a story for you. I have a personal contact with Ronda Rousey and her team, and my guy told me on Wednesday, the fight when she fought Rose on JJ, he's like, man, she's standing acting like my girl Ronda. He's like, she gonna take that L. And then that weight cut, she looked like Skeletor on that scale. He doubled down. Oh, I'm doubling my money. She gonna get knocked out tomorrow. I'm still thinking, whatever, bro. Sure enough, 24 hours later, looking at them MSG lights and she hadn't been the same since.
Yeah, man, it's crazy seeing that stuff like up close. Like for me, the very first thing. So 214 was the only UFC event that I've covered in person in Anaheim. So I've been, I've covered Invicta, I've covered a couple other things, some boxing and whatnot around the Los Angeles area, but UFC 214 was my first introduction to the behind the scenes stuff. Mm-hmm. And to be there while John Jones and Daniel Cormier started jaw-jacking with each other at that first press conference. Oh, wow. And then because as an outsider looking in previously, it seemed like, okay, they genuinely don't like each other, but a lot of this has got to be theatrics because it's just so over the top. Like, yeah, right. Like even at that little scrimmage they got into at the press conference in the MGM. I mean, that was a trash ass fight. That wasn't like that wasn't what you'd expect with two world class fighters, hitting each other up in the street. That just looked like some WWE shit, if you ask me. So that's what I thought it was. But to see them up close and the hatred they genuinely have for each other, where you could feel it in the air, like, man, this is all the way real. To see Dana White at the press conference, the post-fight press conference, and on the mic just grilling Tyron Woodley, just skewering him, and like, man, I'm seeing the Dana White rant. This is the stuff that legends are made out of.
that fight week as a whole, man, is probably going to be one that I will never forget for many, many reasons.
Did you get Jack?
Yeah. So my first trip to LA ever, all of my equipment gets stolen. My stuff gets stolen. Jose Young gets his stuff stolen. Jim Edwards was the only person that didn't have anything stolen. I think Danny Austin was also with us. And it just so happens to be the very first fight week out of many that we've covered with those guys, that group of guys. First time we all decided, let's go get some exercise in. Let's go run the trails over here. Run the trails, come back, and all the shit's gone. So it was like, we probably should have just went back and had some beer like we normally do. We would have had all our stuff, But not only that's one reason why I'll never forget that fight week. But like you were saying, the whole John Jones, Daniel Cormier dynamic was something special, man. That, you know, I was just like looking back. I'm just glad to say I was a part of that. Like, you know, in some capacity, watching Daniel Cormier get more intense as the week progressed. And the crazy thing was, that was also the first week where the MMA JA had the very first meeting, very first, I guess, official dinner together. You know, and as we were having this dinner at Roy's, inside we were sitting out on the little patio area. We were all sitting out there. There's about 20 of us, 25 of us, I think. And towards the end of our dinner, towards the end of our little, you know, meeting and everything, who's inside in the little room in there is Daniel Cormier and his team. So he walks out naturally. He's got Cain Velasquez with him, his whole family and everything. He walks out. This is the night before the fight, or 2 nights before the fight, I forget. But he walks out there and he's just like, you can kind of see on his face even then, he's like so focused, even though he's like, you know, out having a good time with his family, trying to relax. Like, you can still see, like, you know, he walked up to me, shook his hand, everything, and I could just kind of see in his eyes, like, he knew something huge was about to happen on Saturday night. You know, it's just crazy. Yeah. Like, he was the only person I got that vibe from, though, because I saw a couple other guys around town, you know, they're relaxing, you know, they felt relaxed. Not DC. DC, he had, like, this kind of underlying intensity the entire time. Like, because he was talking with us, trying to joke with us and everything, but, like, you know, in between when somebody's responding to him, he like that kind of look on his face. That, like,
yeah,
like
he had like a killer look in his eyes that whole week. That definitely stood out to me. At the scrum after the open workouts, I definitely remember. I forget what I asked him, but something about that question seemed to, like, he was still being himself. He's still being really nice and polite and trying to be as open as he could. But he just had this undertone of just venom right there, and he was just like, I don't even. The gist of it to me was like, I don't even care what anybody thinks. Like, this is what it is. I wanted to hear like street Daniel Cormier come out. That's what I thought was about to happen.
Yeah, I remember what I asked him. I remember what I asked him at that thing right there. Like, I was like, because John had came out before him. You know, John Jones did his whole thing or whatever. He didn't work out. Just did the scrum and then went around, took pictures with some people on his way back. DC does the workout, goes to the thing. I remember I asked him. I was like, John was just out here, and he said after the fight he wants to shake your hand. Are you willing? Do you want to do that and make good with him? And he just kind of stared off for a second. He's like, I'll shake his hand. Yeah. After I win. After I win, I'll shake his hand. And then we'll say, let's run it back for the 3rd time. Get ready. And then just stared off again. Like, give me that little, like, that nod and look. He's like, yeah.
Yeah.
I was like, okay. All right, man.
Hey, did you get thrown off or confused at all when you saw, like, the kickboxer that Cormier brought in camp that looked just like John Jones?
That was, wasn't it Adesanya?
Was that Adesanya?
I mean, I don't want to misspeak. I'm pretty sure it was Adesanya.
Because
he looked, bro, I'm telling you, he looked just like John Jones. It confused the hell out of me. When Cormier and his team came out for the scrum, I just see this guy standing beside me and look just like John Jones. I'm like, what? Why is Jones here? Like, why is he? Like, what's going on? I'm telling you, I was so thrown off, and then it dawned on me, like, after staring at this guy for about 10 seconds, that I realized, oh, this isn't John Jones. Like, he probably thought I was just some weirdo.
Yeah, man. I'm trying to figure out. I hope I'm not misspeaking, but I want to say, no. It was Frank Munoz.
It was Frank Munoz. Okay, yeah, that's right. That sounds about right.
But Adesanya, who did Adesanya help? He helped somebody big recently, or before he came to the UFC. He helped somebody pretty big. I'm drawing a blank right now. Anyways, we'll move on.
We're talking about the BS rankings. Let's talk about the real rankings. What do you rank DC as the GOAT? To me, he's in the top 2. If a DC fan came up to me with some, like, just crunk, I would listen to him after what he did last week. But the same thing is, John did beat him once, fair and square. And 2, he's also set a new standard. Like, I like Mighty Mouse, but really, who is he beating? And if it was that easy to win multiple belts and multiple weight classes, everybody would be doing it. That's like the natural progression now. Like, say something I was telling Matt last week. you have a GOAT come through, a GOAT contender 10 years from now, he's going to have to win a belt in multiple weight classes. That's going to be a standard if you're going to be in that conversation. That's like the norm for boxing.
Yeah, I mean, but of course, with boxing, I mean, like there's a weight class like every 3 pounds, so that's much easier to do in boxing than it is to do in MMA. But I gotta put Daniel Cormier in my. I probably put him number 2 behind GSP.
See, the whole thing with GSP though is his thing wasn't consecutively. Like you can put him up there, but I have him behind John and DC.
See, I don't have like John Jones is by far the greatest talent we've ever seen. But if you've got 2 test failures, it's hard for me to talk about you above people that don't have those same failures that accomplish great things. So it's really hard for me to count him over DC despite having the wins over him.
I give because you that. That's what we was talking about beginning though. With the second one we don't know, and the first one the PED. So that's where it gets cloudy at. Like Anderson Silva was clear cut PED. There's no questions about Anderson, but Johns is very cloudy and murky. If anything, he was taking a performance deterrent, taking cocaine.
Well, I mean, the coke. I don't even want to get into it.
He doing a deterrent, not an enhancer. So it's kind of like, but if somebody said that, I'm talking to you, I don't know you from Adam on the street. I would not say you're crazy. I can see why somebody would say that. But the second test is definitely how it shake out to me is a telltale. Because what they come around and overturn it, like they've been doing in some of these, because it's been long, so it's not out of question that they might have it, or like, well, it was whatever, it was tainted or whatever, and this whole narrative gets changed real quick.
Yeah, I just don't. So when you look at USADA has been in effect since what 2015, I think, or 2014, some in that range. John Jones has been booked 3 times since, and he has failed 2/3 of the time.
Yeah.
So you've got to call into question, and even before that, the original Cormier fight. I don't know if you guys remember this, but there was along with the coke test, there was something off with his testosterone levels. There were some endocrinologists that I read that were pointing out something pointing towards steroid use in his test results. They were saying like it didn't make sense for a man of his age, an athlete, a world-class athlete, to have testosterone levels that low at certain points that it indicated some sort of steroid cycle that he just finished. Mm-hmm. You know, and then there's the story about him hiding under the cage at Jackson and like peeing under the cage or something. They tried to collect the pee under the cage or something like that to test it. You know, whatever story the urban legend has floated around about this.
Imagine that. Imagine soaked up pee under the octagon they tried to use for a sample. Imagine.
And actually talking to lawyers about collecting said pee. I mean, like what?
And expecting it to be clean of anything.
This is one of those moments where I'm thinking like, what the hell am I doing with myself? Because you know, as guys that are covering MMA, we have to be experts or at least familiar with some of the craziest stuff. Like I didn't know what an Eskimo brother was until a few days ago.
I'm same here, bro. I asked my old lady about that, and she's like looking at me like trying to break it down. I felt the same way. I knew what that was until the other day.
I knew what it was, but I was like, I didn't see where it originated from initially, and I was like, okay, let me search Twitter real quick. Sure enough, Brendan Schwab. I was like, oh my goodness. As soon as I saw it was Brendan Schaub, I knew exactly what was going on. I was like, oh shit. I was like, oh shit. He said it. He finally said it. Because that's been a rumor for the longest.
Oh, I got confirmation.
It's been a rumor for the longest.
Yeah, I got confirmation that that's true, but that's none of my business though.
Right.
Some of the stories I've heard, like, wow, like that really happened. It's crazy. Like we have to become experts on steroids and hormonal systems and weight cuts, and there are so many different like ugly aspects to the sport that we have to become familiar with. We have to deal with a plethora of personalities that border on all sorts of offensive behavior, like for instance. I'm wondering why nobody's really talking about this. I think, seriously, Matt, me, you, and Andreas Hell might have been the only people I saw on Twitter saying something about this, about Mike Perry getting liberal with the N-word. It's just like, bro, come on, man.
Bro. Nah.
Like, of really, what are we doing? Like what?
Andrew, what's your take on the way the UFC treats black folks in media? Since there's only a handful, because I've had my bouts, but the main thing is you get labeled a certain way because they're uncomfortable with things that they don't know, and it's weird. Like, I'm pretty sure all three of us got rowdy relatives that are 10 times more hostile than any one of us.
Oh yeah.
But I've been labeled as hostile because I'm gonna ask you questions when your A and B don't equal C, which is 75% of the time, and then you gonna remotely try to cost me money. I'm really gonna come at you, but then I gotta be labeled as something that starts with the N and end with the R. But when I let you know my feelings, then I gotta be the bad guy.
Yeah, I think that's it's. I haven't personally experienced anything from the UFC. Like the very few dealings I've had officially with the UFC have been very good. You know, they've treated me well. I was actually very surprised I got credentialed for Staples Center in August because like
it's a process
I don't
sometimes, man.
When it was taking a little bit for that credential to come back. I was like, man, they probably were going to reject it because like I haven't exactly been very kind in my words for the UFC in my recent writing. So I'm thinking, oh, maybe I'm on the shit list, but I got credentialed. So I think it's more so an issue with their treatment of black fighters, and I don't even want to put it out there like they are being racist necessarily, at least directly racist.
No.
I think it's more so an ignorance. Yeah, it's more of an ignorance, like not knowing what to do. Because the opportunities that a lot of white fighters have seen, you know, they should be extending some of those to guys like Tyron Woodley and Demetrius Johnson that are so dominant. You know, like for instance, one thing that always confuses the mess out of me, Straight Outta Compton was a sponsor for UFC 190. And in fact, Betch Kohei, when she got knocked out, she face planted right on the logo.
Oh, that was a meme for a while.
Yeah. Oh, big time. That was the best ad that NWA could have had for that movie during that fight. And it was like they constantly were saying Straight Outta Compton coming out next week or whatever. Please explain to me why Tyron Woodley was in the movie. He was in the movie, and there was no mention of this.
Right.
I didn't know he was in the movie at all until like I saw it, and there he was. He was. There are a lot of missed opportunities, man. Like, please explain why Amanda Nunes and her last title defense. Why am I drawing a blank on who she fought?
Raquel Pennington.
Raquel Pennington. Yeah. So you had the first fight between two openly gay fighters, and that's it's kind of a big deal. Yeah, it may not please the sensibilities of the clowns that flood the Sherdog comment section on a lot of the articles and in the forums and whatnot, but the pay-per-view only sold 150,000. It wouldn't have hurt to promote it to someone else.
Right.
There are a lot of things that they're just forgetting to do. Like Derek Lewis was saving lives in Houston during the floods, literally saving lives himself. Granted, he did end up not fighting on that card because his back flared up like the day of the fight or whatever. But but that's something that should have been part of the narrative going into it. Like, this man is saving lives, literally saving lives. Why is there no attention brought on that? There are a lot of opportunities that have been missed. Like for instance, I don't know if y'all saw Michael Bisping on The Breakfast Club.
I didn't see that.
It was trash. It was trash. It was so trash. Because like they didn't really know who he was or nothing like that. And Bisping was trying to do his Bisping thing, but it just the personalities didn't click. And I'd been wondering, like, man, why didn't they put Tyron on there? Why didn't they set that up for Tyron? Put him on The Breakfast Club.
He was on there.
He was recently. But back then he wasn't. Like, he should have been well before. Like, man, I saw Triple G on there. He don't even speak English.
You're right about that, man. I got a piece that's currently up on ESPN Undefeated. I touch on it, but it's like you really can't get into it because you're gonna have bullets coming at you for no reason just because people are uncomfortable. So I kind of kept it and kind of put that out there for the reader to suck in from the fighter's point of view. But I want to get them in trouble. They don't want to get in trouble. So it's like
Yeah.
you can't really like put that narrative out there, even though that's the reality.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I am thankful for that I'm not, a straight up journalism. Like I'm not a journalist. I'm not going to go out and break news. At least that's not my intent. Maybe I will at some point, but I'm not going out there breaking news and doing like that groundwork as a reporter. So I have a lot of leeway in that I write mainly opinion pieces. Occasionally I'll write a profile about somebody, but for the most part I write opinion pieces. So my opinion, hey, I'm standing by that. Like I'm standing by it, and I don't give a damn whether you like it or not. Like I'm just gonna say it. And especially considering there aren't many of us as black men or black people, period, in the journalism world in mixed martial arts. There finally are more black fighters. That's good to see. But as far as the media goes, it's not a whole lot of us. So that side has to be represented. The black fighters out there, they need somebody that can speak for them. They can say the things that maybe they're afraid to say because their careers could be harmed. So I'll gladly jump on that sword, man. I'll gladly do that because it's needed. We need to have our voices out there, and we need to just say what we feel. And say it as honestly, and the only way anything changes, the only way we can bring the proper attention to things, if we speak about it honestly.
Yeah, that's the thing, man. It's a part of the sport. I mean, like you kind of alluded to earlier, is that what you mentioned with the Nunes and Pennington thing. Like there's so many markets that they've kind of tapped into before, but it's like they kind of put their foot in once and then they pulled their foot right back out, and it's like, all right, we're just gonna go with whoever's here. Like. You got to continue to put your foot in that water into these markets that I feel that they haven't grabbed. Like I don't feel that they've grabbed as much of the black community as they can. I don't think they've grabbed nearly as much of the the gay and lesbian community as they can. Which they had the We Are All Fighters T-shirt that they did for UFC. I think that was UFC 200. That they had that campaign going, and that was cool. You had all the fighters in the shirt, but that was one weekend. After that, it was like I said, you put your foot in the water, put your foot right back out. So it's like I don't understand like how they're planning on doing this sometimes, and I thought it would kind of change a little bit, after WME and Endeavor, bought it out and be like, okay, maybe they'll start expanding their profile here with who they're marketing to, and we've seen that a little bit, but I think we've seen more so it's just okay, now we're gonna dive more into the entertainment angle more than anything and try to latch on more people organically that way versus actually going out and doing more things to grab these people from these communities. Tyron Woodley talks about this all the time. It's just one of those things. I don't understand how they're going about it, and I don't think we will ever.
No,
it's
we won't.
It's crazy because it's like, to play the other side of the fence here, you got Colby Covington wearing the MAGA hat. Wearing the MAGA hat, saying he's going to go, and Dana White saying, yeah, I can set up that meeting with Donald Trump. Like, bro. like, like.
Yeah, all right, just face palm.
Yeah.
Just face palm that one.
I don't even want to get into that whole side of things, but it's just, like even with that, I would be more surprised if they didn't dive into that more when that fight gets announced.
Oh, they're so running with that because it just screams money and controversy.
Yeah,
they're gonna jump in that one head first, and quite honestly, man, I think it's gonna get ugly. I think it's gonna get really ugly. And you know what?
A preview of that 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And you know what? I'm here for all the smoke. I'm here for all. Okay.
You go all up and down.
I tell you, check the comment section on my articles. It's gonna be fire, son. We ain't playing. We ain't playing no games, man. We firing off shots at them. Like I really. Oh man. WME. You would think that they would be better at marketing than what they clearly show with the UFC because that's kind of their business. What we've seen of WME more than anything else, we've seen fighters go on late night talk shows. Like that's the extent of their extensive marketing. I guess if you put a guy on Jimmy Kimmel, now he's a star. Like, no, you gotta do more than that. You've gotta go boots to the ground. You gotta you got to really put these guys out there and put them in the right spots and let a fan base grow. This is the difference between seeking a payday, seeking these one-off paydays, building a lasting sport, building a lasting sport league. Like,
yeah. And the thing with DC and Brock Lesnar, man, it's like the heavyweight division was gaining so much momentum. You had contenders coming up. You had Francis Ngannou coming up. Okay, he lost his title opportunity. Then he had rematch. Okay, he lost. He still is a shell of himself. He's going to find himself again, I think. Curtis Blades just destroying people. Just busted open Alistair Overeem. That dude's making a name for himself. Is he the biggest personality in the world? No. But got Alexander Volkanovski out there. Not Volkanovski, Alexander Volkov out there.
Mm-hmm.
He's also making a name for himself. Is he the biggest personality in the world? No, he doesn't speak English all that well either. But organic competition, true competition on the sporting aspect, the heavyweight division was coming up. And then all of a sudden you're going to Brock Lesnar is back from the dead 8 years later. Like, what?
Yeah, it is baffling. I mean, it'll make a lot of money. We know that.
Yes,
it's going to make a boatload of money. And quite honestly, I'm happy for Cormier that he gets the opportunity to make that huge payday. Because if there's anybody in the sport that deserves that, it's him. So let him make all that money. I'm happy for him in that sense. But if we're talking about genuine sporting competition, this is not what we're talking about. This is not the conversation that we should be having. The conversation we should be having, as far as if the UFC intends on lasting, because the way they're running now, this is not going to last. It simply will not work beyond a certain point because, they got a lot of money from that ESPN deal that's going to be rolling in, and that alone will sustain the organization. But what's going to happen after that? If the ratings continue to go down, if the star power continues to pretty much be a landfill, what are you going to have then?
I think Endeavor / WME is more worried about paying that $4 billion debt. Because like I tell my co-hosts here, just because you got bought for $4 billion don't mean you worth $4 billion. Because if you were, that's why there would be no debt.
Oh yeah. Oh
so
man.
We're focused about that debt versus the actual product, and something like you said, the rubber's gonna meet the road sooner or later.
But here's
they got ripped off. They got ripped off, bro.
They had a nice come up. But like the thing with DC and Brock, for example, is like this. It's a one-off, right? And like I don't think personally that Brock Lesnar, if he wins, is going to show up for another fight. So what's going to stop? What's going to stop
He's
Brock
43.
Lesnar?
People not
what's
talking
going to
about
stop
that.
Brock Lesnar from cheating again this time for a one-off? He's still going to get his millions of dollars to show up. Whereas DC on paper was not guaranteed $1 million for this last fight against Stipe, which is crazy in itself.
It's ridiculous. Yeah, that's a shame, man. I don't even know what to say about that one because then the worst case scenario is Brock Lesnar winning. That is the worst case scenario right there.
Exactly. Is he really going to come back? Really?
Because even if he does come back, from that, like then what? Then you have a guy who clearly should not be the heavyweight champion fighting as the heavyweight champion. It doesn't. They're setting themselves up for too much potential for failure. Like they're not even. It's no thought of what tomorrow looks like. It's like, all right, payday now. Now. And the last time we saw this happen in sports, payday now, was boxing. And boxing has, fortunately now I think boxing has gotten back on the right track. But they've had to dig themselves out of a hole because promoters simply were chasing the payday and were not looking into the future of the sport.
Well, he's spot on. That's why you see more of the because PBC is a prime example. They were kind of what the UFC is now 2 years ago. Now all of a sudden you got Keith Thurman and Sean Porter fighting. Now all of a sudden you got Sean Porter and Danny Garcia fighting, and the winner fights Earl Spence because the people find that $1 billion hedge fund that support Al Heyman and them like, hey, bro, we need some returns on this stuff. But they got continuity, which we don't have in the UFC. Which, as you said, it's gonna have a rubber meets the road type moment within the next 2 years. It's gonna happen.
Yeah, it definitely will happen. I mean, at least I'll look at it this way. since I'm one of the many people in MMA media that does not actually make a living doing this, it won't affect my income a whole lot.
Right.
So I'm like, I'll still go to work and do my thing, but whatever, man. I don't even know what I'm saying, man. It's just just throw the whole thing away. Like it's just gotten ridiculous. It's really gotten ridiculous, and I shouldn't even say getting ridiculous because there have been ridiculous happenings in the UFC for a very, very long time. But now it's like they're not even trying to hide it. Like it's just out on Front Street without any sort of. Do you guys remember when Chael Sonnen got the title shot against John Jones, and it was just like what? Like it didn't make any sense. But
I remember Chael Sonnen holding up a Coke can, and everybody was like, "Why is he holding up a Coke can in weigh-ins?" 5 years later, everybody's like, "Oh,
Chael's genius.
Chael's a troll to the max, bro." Like, dang, like that was when those dots connected way back. Like I was like, Chael was on this for years, and he was trying to tell us. It's crazy.
I mean, there's so many things that have happened that have gone outside of the realm of integrity in the sport. I mean, we can go back to cutting Jake Shields to where it was just like
Fitch.
Why? Yeah, and John Fitch and Yushin Okami. So like, why would you do that?
Bader.
Yeah, Bader. Oh my God, they could use Ryan Bader right now.
Phil Davis.
That 205-pound division is a wasteland. At Busasi, they like. That man, they could use Ryan Bader and Phil Davis and Musasi and Horiguchi. Like these are so many important names that they could be using if they were concerned about being the #1 organization for mixed martial arts. These are people. Ben Askren, that would be on the roster.
Yeah, Ben Askren was a big one. If he could ever get on the same page with Dana, like who knows what he could have been? We'll never know.
But hey, CM Punk.
Hey, he had to get his 2 fights in, man.
Yeah,
that's crazy though. And less fights than CM Punk. That's crazy.
Yeah.
And you know what? While I just mentioned that, it reminded me of something. So we got to give a shout out to a fellow guy in the MMA media, Mike Jackson.
I was about to say. I'm glad he got that
he did the
fight.
damn thing.
Man, me too. I'm definitely glad he got that. He's been campaigning for that for a while. Please explain to me how Dana can just lash Mike Jackson for not finishing the fight, and he was being a clown and blah blah blah, etc. etc. But in the same breath, you're gonna praise CM Punk for getting whooped up.
Yeah, Dana does that all the time. He did that to Francis. He did that to Francis just 2 weeks ago, talking about his ego got the best of him. How about be a promoter and say, yeah, maybe he just had a bad night. We'll figure it out. We'll come back to it. Brendan Schaub said this perfectly on one of his recent episodes when he was talking about Dana doing this, because Dana does this all the time. He does it all the time, and he does it. He did it to Demetrius even before Demetrius had a fight one time when he was like, "Yeah, we'll put him in the main event. We'll see how much that sells." Like,
it's like
what?
It's like, and then 2 weeks later, you're gonna ask me to buy it. Come on now.
Exactly.
Like really?
Come on, man. Like, let's be a little bit consistent here. A little bit consistent. But I mean, let's talk about some normal news. Completely normal news in the UFC.
There's normal news?
Yeah, it's.
Okay.
You'll detect the sarcasm instantly. Conor McGregor hugging and taking pictures with Vladimir Putin today at the World FIFA World Cup.
When I saw that, I just shook my head. Like, oh man, I didn't want to read a single comment. I didn't want to look at Twitter or nothing. It's just like, whatever. This is MMA. Like this. Can you think of anything more MMA? Yeah. It's like this. Just like I said, throw the whole thing away.
I'll give the official UFC Twitter handle credit for not tweeting that picture and tweeting the one where he's just sitting looking at the field. I will give them credit for not tweeting the one with Putin out. I'll give them that credit.
Oh man, I'm telling you, like, where's Ramzan Kadyrov? Where's he when you need him? That's how you pronounce his?
Yes. Oh my God. Like,
was he at the game too?
That's a whole nother topic that would take like another 3 hours to even begin to try to make sense of.
It's just like what are you guys doing over there? Like what?
It's
whatever.
It's madness. And Ben Folks from MMA Junkie put a poll out about that, right? Like right after it happened, was like, does Conor not know who this guy is, or does he not care? And I just replied, I was like, both.
That sounds
I mean, that's what it is.
Conor plays the role to a T, though. I'm not from here. I don't know. We don't do that in my country.
Yeah,
maybe he's cozying up to Putin so he can get a presidential pardon for his pending charges. Who knows what he's up to, man?
Dude, who knows? Who knows? The layers run deep.
Yeah, he's in there. He's talking to Putin like, "Hey, holla at your boy, man. Tell him, pardon me."
Holla at your boy. Oh my God. No kidding, man. There's so much madness covering the sport. It like week in and week out. Like we think we see it all. I mean, outside of the cage, inside the cage, like just past weekend, we saw somebody get finished with hammer fist from the bottom while he was using his ankle to cradle his head. That's the one finish you missed.
That was Randy Brown. Wow. Talking about him. Who's that?
That was Randy Brown getting finished by Nico Price.
Oh no, I didn't.
Never seen that before in my life.
I've never seen anything like that. I've never done anything in a training situation where that was even possible. Like, what? How do you do that? Yeah. Like that was. I mean, I guess you've seen it all, man. We've seen people jump off cages and everything else. I guess this is the next step. Hammer fist from the bottom.
Well, while using your outside leg to cradle his neck so he can't move it back. Like
that's some creativity right there for you, man. That is creativity.
Just some high level on the fly. I'm gonna figure out a way to hurt you, and not only like I'm gonna completely knock you out from the bottom. It's so wild.
Man, how hard do you have to hammer fist something? Like, think about the level of force it takes to actually knock somebody out, but then to do that with your shoulders against the floor,
yeah,
and having really no space to generate power through your hips, like that's athletically that's a hell of an accomplishment right there to pull that off.
It really is, man. It's crazy.
So.
It's impressive, man, and I tweeted right after that happened. I was like, "Enjoy that bonus," and that was like what with 8 fights to go, I think. Whatever.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, you're getting that bonus for real.
Yeah, nothing's topping that. I mean, but then again, I think I said the same thing on was it 194 when it was 2 flying knee KOs in a row.
Mm.
And in the first one, I was like, "Oh, that's knockout of the night," and then the next one, like, "Oh, never mind."
Yeah. What do you think they should change the bonus structure out to, like, if you get a finish, you get some sort of extra bonus just for a finish regardless?
Yeah, I think so, because you can't. It's really difficult to take away from. I'll put it to you this way, like the Vanderlei Silva and Kung Lee fight that was right before Dan Henderson and Shogun.
Oh yeah.
2 incredibly great fights, but only one of them gets fight of the night.
It's in the UFC Hall of Fame fight.
Yeah, like that. I mean, that was something special. But we forget about that. And there's so many times where that happens on every single card. You'll see a crazy knockout, or you'll see this crazy back and forth fight, and then the next fight or 2 fights later, something tops it. And those other guys got to be sitting back in the locker room or sitting in the hospital, wherever they are, busted up and bleeding, just like, damn, that's 50 G's I don't have no more.
It's crazy.
And what's your take on people like, for instance, like the crazy fight that wasn't a fight last week, like with Derek and Francis? People talk about that, but then they think the back and forth blood and guts is cool. Like, my motto on this show is, what is cool about getting hit? There's nothing cool about getting hit. But people and fans think it's cool. And then you got these fighters that do this craziness, and then since you don't go to many fights, I talk about Matt, they didn't see that dude that they were just cheering, walking back, don't know where the hell he is, with them cheers at the end, and he ain't got an ass whooping trying to quote-unquote entertain. That's like, there's nothing smart about that. That's why Floyd Mayweather went 50-0 and didn't take no L's, because he didn't take no damage.
Yeah, I mean, you gotta fight smart for your career. Like, that's the only time getting hit is cool if you're the one that's not getting hit. That's it. Like, that's it. And they're
big facts.
Like all the people who big decide facts. Like that's like the guys who decide that that's the way their career is going to go. Very few of them achieve any real level of success.
Justin Gaethje.
I mean, yeah, like Justin Gaethje, like we found his ceiling now. Like
right.
He's literally chipped away years of his life every time he steps into the cage, and he's cut off his earning potential beyond a certain point because his chin ain't gonna last that long.
No, and another thing too, like for instance, I was at Tyron and Wonder Boy 1 and 2, and people were booing, and like to me, they're playing chess out there. It's just high level chess.
You get in there. I dare you get in there with a guy that hits as hard as Tyron or a guy that's as tricky as Wonder Boy and you get out there and and take too many chances.
Yeah,
See what happens.
People don't understand the margin of error. The margin of error is like
slim.
It's a game of millimeters. Millimeters decide people's careers and their lives and the money they make and their legacies and all that. You'd be a damn fool if you go out there and just stick your chin out and just say, "Oh, let's do it," like that.
So
no,
you've trained, correct? Yes. So I know you spent some time on the mats. I've spent some time on the mats. From experience, just sparring, if you blink at the wrong time, you can get caught.
Oh yeah,
like
easily.
People don't understand that. People do not understand like the margin for error is so thin because for you, like sitting on the outside, sitting cage side, wherever you are in the arena watching it, you're seeing two guys that are moving around. They're moving around. Not too much is happening. But for those two guys, this even happens in sparring. For people out there that don't actually train, this even happens in sparring. Whether you're going 50% sparring, whatever, you're locked in and everything's moving super slow for you.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas everybody else on the outside, they're watching everything at full speed, normal speed. But you're in that zone. You're getting in that flow state where everything is slowed down. You're in that zone, and you can pick up on every little thing, facial expression. The way that they reacted to your feints and everything like that. The fighters that are actually in the moment seeing these things, it's super slowed down for them. And like I said, if you blink at the wrong time, that could be night-night. And especially in a high-level fight like that with Tyron Woodley and Wonderboy Thompson,
yeah,
dude, you can't make any mistakes.
You get sweat dripping your eye for a split second, and that could be that could be your ass right there.
It's
like
over.
That's not. Yeah, and it's a wrap at that point. So
perfect example. It happened with Sage just last night. He said he blinked and he got caught with a punch.
Yeah,
perfect example.
Like that. like that doesn't. That's not you. It's too tricky to go out there and think that everybody's going to go out on their shield and all this other stuff that keeps bloodthirsty people happy who don't do a lick of training in their own right. Yeah. I tell, and for all those people who don't want to train or can't train or whatever, and they have all this to say about fighters, sit cage side. Sit as close to fighting. You don't even have to go to a UFC fight and sit cage side because not everybody can afford that, of course. But go to a local show and sit close to the cage. You can feel the hits. Yeah. You can see every little thing. Like for instance, at 214 when Tyron knocked Maya down. If I remember this correctly, when Maya hit the ground, he kind of like slid a little bit across the canvas.
Yeah.
He gets up and his knees are scraped because that's how hard he got hit and fell back.
Yeah.
Like those little details. And you see the look on Maya's face change after that first hit was like, oh man, I'm into something. These little things that you don't see from the television broadcast or you don't see sitting in the nosebleeds. You've got to keep that in mind. Like these are real human beings. That there's a complexity to this, and not only complexity in the human beings themselves and their psychology and their emotions and their athleticism and whatnot. You're dealing with technical complexities. You're dealing with the style matchups, and this guy when he throws his jab, he slips his head a little bit to the right, or all these little things that they have to make. And are you being baited into something? Is this a setup? It's so deep into a rabbit hole. You sitting there drinking beer in the stands, eating popcorn, knows nothing.
Kick his ass! Kick his ass!
Stop it. Yeah, like come on now. The one that drives me insane, the reason why I prefer not watching fights at a bar is to hear somebody say, "Oh, if I was in there, I would."
That's not the one that gets me. That one is
Woo!
the one that the Ric Flair woos is bad too. The one that drives me crazy is anytime that there's a clinch against the cage. Knee!
And like
wow, you recognize the one thing where they're called for a strike. Everybody in the arena recognizes that one thing. Like, come on.
Yeah, and even like half the time they're screaming for a knee, you can't do one. Yeah, it's not applicable. The hips are like hugged up against each other. You're talking about knee, like knee what?
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Like what do you how generate force from how? Like what are you going to do? Does anyone in the audience know the word pummel? Can we have Yeah, the underhook, overhook.
No.
And when you think about these dumbass trainers, like people always like it's kind of like on TV how people respond to a hot take. Like everybody's making a big deal about when I won't say Raquel Pennington and her coaches make her go back out there, but then they don't talk about like when Edmond told Ronda, "Come on, champ, keep doing what you're doing." I see you ain't got an ass kick, but they don't say nothing about that. Like that happens more often than somebody forcing their fighter to go back out there, which is managing negligence, and nobody throws a towel in. These motherfuckers be getting their ass kicked, and nobody says nothing about that. It's like, that's more applicable than somebody that knows their fighter telling them, hey, you're not gonna get away out. We know you can do it, and making them go back out there and fight. But since it's not nothing, that's not sexy to talk about, people don't talk about that. But then they think they know about the damn sport.
Yeah, I mean, there's with dealing with trainer and athlete relationships, that's definitely a very complex thing. I had the experience of being a cornerman some years ago. A buddy of mine that I used to train with, I ended up coaching him for like 5 fights or something like that. And being in the corner is definitely an experience. You know, you're trying to go over a game plan. You're trying to find tendencies. You got to understand your fighter psychology. You got to know what makes them tick. I can think of one time we were at a grappling tournament, and I don't know enough about grappling to be coaching it, but the actual coach was gone, and I was just there. I was like his friend, and I was already like his fitness trainer. So I'm like, all right, well, I'll yell out some pointers to you or something like that. But I made the mistake of whispering something in his ear before a match that he had against a camp that he really hates, and it got him so riled up that he was so focused on his own finish that he set himself up to get submitted in that tournament. You know, I've seen like, okay, if you rile someone up too much, they'll overcommit. At least this guy, he'll overcommit. If you don't say enough, then they'll just be on autopilot. Like, there are so many little fine details that it's going to be different for every single fighter. But that being said, Edmond Tarverdian is just a bad coach.
Dude.
Like he's just not good. And that's him. I don't know anything about his boxers and kickboxers. The only boxer I know of that I know for sure that he trained was Triple G's last opponent. And I can't even come down on Edmond for that one because he was fighting Triple G. So
yeah, there's no real gauge for
on like a few weeks notice, like that wasn't going to be good. Yeah. So we knew what we were getting into that day. But he has a proven track record of being a bad MMA coach. Like I sincerely believe that with Ronda Rousey's skills and the athleticism that she already had in her judo background, she could have walked in to any other camp and did just as much and been just fine. You know, probably would still be in the sport. I don't think he added anything to her game that helped her in any way, shape, or form. Because for someone that's supposed to be such a renowned striking coach, like her footwork was not good. You know, her defense, especially her head movement. See what I did there?
Yeah.
Was not good. Like her even the way she over rotated her punches, which is like a thing that a lot of seasoned strikers do, but you're doing the minutia detail of seasoned strikers without the overall picture of just throwing a proper punch. Like, doesn't make any sense.
Right.
You know, that Mayweather style mitt work does not apply to MMA very well. It's like there are a lot of things. Yeah, it's just like I honestly believe. So I teach at a boxing gym in the LA area. And I teach mostly like group classes, and I have some private, so I teach them like actual fight technique. But most of it is just like the group classes are like cardio boxing, essentially. I really think that you could pull any of the trainers there, and we found if we had Ronda Rousey right then, like in the beginning of her career, she probably would have gone further just on her judo because we would have taught her better striking for sure.
Right.
Like for sure. I'm totally convinced of that. We can't really talk about bad coaching in MMA and really talk about Edmond Tarverdian a whole lot because he is the overall just crazy.
Oh no, I want to talk about him. I'm talking about these coaches in general.
Okay.
My point, the big thing, it's not even to single out a coach. It's just that's a very common thing. But when something happens with the Raquel thing, how dare they do such a thing when they don't talk about these dudes with these step-by-step strategies, but they supposed to be these gurus, and they automatically getting their fighters' ass beat because they ain't have no damn game plan. Or if they have a game plan, they don't have no plan B or C in their life, so they effed up.
Yeah, I mean, it's the thing is, it's definitely a lot to that. I mean, one, there's obviously a culture of selective outrage in society, period. You know, you get outraged and frustrated at things that you get outraged and frustrated at, and everything that's kind of in that ballpark, doesn't fit your narrative, so you ignore it. I mean, that's a very common thing just in human beings in general. But I'll say this, in defense of some coaches, like, there was one particular fight where my guy got his ass kicked really bad, and we approached it completely wrong. It was a last minute, like, he took the fight on like 36 hours notice or something like that. You know, it was a weight class up, you know, and the guy was already prepping the fight, but his opponent got knocked out or whatever. The style matchup was bad. It was just bad overall. My guy insisted on taking the fight, so I'm like, all right, you know, I'm there. And it didn't come out too well. I mean, now he's in PFL now. The guy that beat my fighter, Rob Watley.
Okay.
He's the guy that he just like won against Thiago Tavares with the dick kick.
I think I remember seeing that come across Twitter.
Yeah, so like there are a lot of things going on that only the trainer and the fighter would really know. But still, I think we need to have honest cornering. It needs to be honest. If your guy goes in there and the fight is close, if the fight is close and it's going into the last round, don't say, "Oh, you got this in the bag."
Yes. Oh, we heard that just last night at Boise.
Yeah, last night that was one of those fights. Like you got to go in there, you got to let them know, hey, this could go either way. I have you winning. The judges may not.
I wouldn't even say I have you winning. I wouldn't even say that.
Go get this round. Go get this money.
Go get this round. Yeah. I would say.
What.
I would say I have you winning just as a way to instill some confidence. Just say like, hey, I see you're doing good things, but you got to do more.
Right.
You know that
goes with the relationship of the fighter. You got to know what they'll respond to as well.
Yeah, exactly. I think like Greg Jackson is really good for that. Like he's very good at those little tricks. To yell certain things at some guys and then talk softly to others. To influence the judges by always saying the fighter's full name every time they land a strike. It's like, good job, John Jones.
Yes.
Good job, John Jones. You know, very good at the psychology behind that, and that's
the breathing. People overlook that, like because Matt talked about rolling. I don't be on the mats. I've been on some pads, but I trip out when you can see in between rounds when you look at somebody's diaphragm. And Greg Jackson fighters, they're cool when it's high, bringing it down in that minute so they can recuperate. Well, other people they all doing the icing stuff and they shit's on overdrive and they usually get knocked out later that round or they gas out because their trainer has not noticed that little bitty detail to calm their ass down in that 1 minute. They're not taking the full advantage of it.
Yeah, and you definitely have to have some sort of like reality brought into it to like get somebody to kind of zero in to what's going on, and to not get overexcited or to not get too calm. And typically, I would assume 9 times out of 10, you got to calm a guy down as opposed to rile him up in between rounds, because I mean, we seem to forget a lot of times, like those dummies yelling at the TVs and sitting in the nosebleeds. Those dummies aren't quite remembering that these are literally trained killers fighting other trained killers.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
So you gotta be careful about everything in it. It doesn't. It's too complex for the guy sipping on his Budweiser to quite get. But.
And one thing we kind of touched on to wrap it all together was that, you know, to kind of tie into that whole corner aspect. You know, I cornered a couple of guys, and you know, when I was training back in Shreveport, and like kind of like that's experience what you're saying, but to wrap it all together with the it's not cool to get hit thing, whereas unless you're the main event, right? Like if your guys are in the co-main event or in the, wherever else placement on the card, if you're there, your guy gets knocked out. You as a fan, you are waiting for the next fight to start. Like that's all you care about. Whereas us as cornermen and fighters, they go to the back. We don't give a shit about the next fight. We're worried about the fighter that just got knocked out. We're worried about because I cornered a guy, one of my main training partners back in Shreveport when I was training. I cornered him for his fight. He ended up in full mount and just gets pummeled out, TKO stoppage, right? Goes to the back. There's I think there's 4 more fights after his. Goes to the back. Finally, he's able to walk, get his wits about him, walk to the back, yada yada, hold his head high as he's walking out. Get to the back, cold concrete floor just lays out and just lays there for 10 minutes. I had to, keep rubbing the ice on him. The next fight is already finished. He's still in the same position. Damn. People don't see that shit, and then they're like, "Go to war." Yeah. Kick his ass.
And there's an aftermath to that war.
Exactly.
There's an aftermath.
Exactly. We had Judo Thunder on here because he knocked old boy out and broke his jaw. And on the same show, we didn't know Dean Thomas was cool with him, and he said they told him not to trade with him, and by him not listening, he got his jaw broke and gonna make no money for a year. And why? To entertain some fans.
Right.
Yeah.
Crazy.
It doesn't
repercussions to that, man. It's craziness.
Yeah, man. After you see someone you care about get their face busted up, and in that cage or in a ring, and you see the aftermath of a loss, and the next day and their face is swollen, you barely recognize them. You think very differently about all these wars. Yes, it's very entertaining. Talking about the Shogun and Dan Henderson fight and Kung Lee and Vanderlei, they were great fights to watch. But know that there's another side to that. There is an aftermath to that is not televised. And if you don't recognize that, and all you care about is just throwing down your money and just seeing blood splatter across the screen, go somewhere else, man. Go watch one of the Saw movies or something, man. Don't even waste my time with it.
I wish more people could see and understand that. I wish more casual fans could see and understand that side of it, because that's why I could never boo. I could never boo a fight.
Yeah.
Never. That's what I love about the Japanese crowds. They don't ever boo fights. Ever.
And I have a hard time even. Exactly, man. I have a hard time even, when we're talking about Derek Lewis and Francis Ngannou fight. It wasn't the most entertaining thing in the world. It definitely wasn't.
Yeah,
but
I
can't boo and hiss and throw them over the coals, because at the same time, would you be willing to engage with Ngannou or Derek Lewis?
Negative.
Right.
No, thank you, sir.
And that's
I'll
the thing,
pass.
That's the thing. Yeah, you can say, that the fight was terrible. It wasn't an entertaining fight, which is true. It's all valid and all well and good. But in the moment while that fight is going on, that fight can end like that. So for people in the crowd to just damn near wanting to throw their beers at the cage because they're so displeased at the lack of inaction in this fight, you're watching two of the most powerful men in this entire sport, where if they land one punch, the fight can be over. And guess what happens if that punch lands? All of a sudden, that boo turns into fuck yeah.
You wild, boy.
I'm serious though. That's what it is. It's immediately flips 180 in that instant as soon as that dude is laid out on the canvas. So
I didn't think. I'm like Anthony. I didn't think it definitely wasn't the most entertaining, but they were playing chess. I think Herb Dean made it bad. I don't think it's a referee. It's like he got a bug he heard somebody tell him, you cannot tell fighters what to do. That's not the referee's job in any fucking combat sport.
I disagree there.
No,
I disagree there.
If they ain't doing the Anderson Silva shit, hiding behind the referee, that's doing too much.
I disagree there. They have a responsibility to make sure that action is taking place in the cage. That's why they stand guys up when there's nothing happening on the ground. Same thing when it's on the feet. If they're not doing the thing, they're supposed to be engaging. You're in a fight.
Well, it's one thing. It's different if it's a stalemate on the ground or a stalemate against the fence.
Right.
But if two guys are just standing there, it's like you can't really force them to run into each other and punch each other. I do think the truth lies somewhere in the middle. I mean, if there's a situation like Nate Quarry and Caleb Starnes, then yes, the ref needs to interfere with that. If one guy is literally running away and making sure he is not engaging at all, then we have a problem. Or if you've got a guy who's going to take you down and just stall for position and not be able to actually affect any offense from there, then yeah, okay, stand them up. But if two guys are just standing there and they're just kind of circling and a shot is thrown from time to time and they're measuring what they're trying to do and whatnot, you just got to let them rock. Whether or not you're entertained by it is another story. But that's the fair thing to do in my eyes for competition.
Yeah, for sure. There's a fine difference between, I mean, like you can look at Woodley Wonder Boy 2. You can tell that they were looking for an opening. With Lewis and Ngannou, for the majority of that fight, it didn't look like they were looking for an opening.
I mean, Derek
they
was.
Were,
I don't think
Derek was.
Derek was for sure, but he, like he said after the fact, his back was hurting. He couldn't commit as he wanted to. There were layers to it, but you can look at those two differences in the fight. There's little nuances there. You can tell. Like Ngannou,
he ain't won nothing.
Yeah, I mean it is what it is.
Yeah.
And of course he gets demoted after the fight by his promoter.
But hey, in a couple of months, buy the pay-per-view featuring Francis Ngannou.
Exactly. He'll probably end up headlining another one of these Idaho shows or wherever it ends up being. But yeah, man, let's use that to stop for now, man. We've gone an hour and 20 minutes just riffing off on all this craziness that is the world of MMA. Anthony Walker, man, thanks for joining the show, man.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
People can follow you on Twitter at AntWalkerMMA and find your work on Sherdog. Anywhere else or anything else that you want to let the people know about?
No, that's it. I'm a simple guy. Real simple guy.
There it is, man. There it is.
Hope you have fun in LA, man. Maybe have you on afterwards since we can't get out there, since we can't folks in another time zone.
Oh man. Oh y'all not coming out to the Staples Center?
No.
I will not.
Oh man. Oh damn! All right, I was looking forward to kicking it with
this weekend for the ESPYs, though.
Oh hey, hit me up. I'm leaving town in a couple days, but hit me up, man.
I'm out there Tuesday. I think it's crazy. It's easier for your boy to get into the ESPYs, one of the top 5 biggest events in the world, to get in than it is a UFC fight. That's facts, but we ain't gonna go there.
Is what it is. That is, people. Episode 60 of Slipping Dip Podcast in the books. Thank you for listening. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to the channel. Like, share, tell your friends all about it. Check out the interview with Mark De La Rosa that's going up on the YouTube page. And you've already listened to it if you're on the audio side of things. But stay tuned. Next week we'll have another episode for you. Some more great guests. And enjoy the show.